Struggling with urban landscapes in watercolor? Today I'm going to show you how watercolor pouring can make intimidating cityscapes manageable and vibrant. Watercolor pouring relies on a good drawing, masking fluid to preserve shapes and values, and flowing paint to create an atmosphere not easily achieved with brushwork alone. So follow along and fast track your basic watercolor skills to create unique, distinct, contemporary urban landscapes that stand out. This is the black and white reference photo that I've printed out and traced the drawing onto the watercolor paper. I've used an app called See Value on my iPad to help me see the values. Here it's 4 values. We have white, light gray, dark gray, and black. To use the app, click on the folder button, choose the photo of interest, and it will automatically go to the setting you last had it on. There's a filter setting where you can do 2 values and set the ratio of black to white, however you like it. And then 3 levels. So this one is white, gray, and black. Then there are 4 levels: white, light gray, dark gray, and black. Now that the transfer is complete, I'm going to mask in the lightest values, which in this case will be white. To mix your paints for your first pour, put a pea-sized dollop into a cup. Add a little bit of water and mix it like you're mixing up wasabi and soy sauce. Once it's completely suspended in water, start to add water so that you get a very light value, such as like tea. Then test that value on a piece of paper. The value should be a lot lighter than you think it should be because you want your first pour to be very light. The colors I'm using are Winsor Yellow, Permanent Magenta, Phthalo Turquoise, and Winsor Blue. I'm using what's called an under-the-bed box, or the brand is Hefty. It's called a high rise. It's a 63 quart box. I have empty cups upside down that will be the support for the paper. I have completed masking the whites that I'm going to preserve. I'm going to wet the paper with a Hake brush, and I'll go both directions. This is Arches cold pressed, 140 pound. It's a watercolor block. This one is a 12 by 16. I'm going to start with 2 colors. I'll start with yellow and the permanent magenta. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mix up the color. I'm not going to pour from the cup because I'm getting too much when I do that, so I'm going to use a dropper. The photo was taken at noon, but I'm imagining that it's an afternoon scene, so I want the light streaming from this direction. This is Stewart Street in Seattle. Before it gets too far, I'm going to add my permanent magenta. And when these paints sit for a little while, they can settle, so you want to mix them up somehow. If I feel like the paper's drying or the paint might be a little light, a little bit too dark, I can spray it. I saw an artist pour one time and she used those little cups that come in laundry detergent, and it had a nice little spout on it. I don't have any of those, so I thought using the eyedroppers or the pipettes would be a good way to get a little bit more control over where the pigment goes. But I want it to be a little bit more crazy, because these buildings are not going to be yellow. And you know what? I think it may be time to add in this turquoise, this phthalo turquoise. So I'll put a little on the edge here. Okay, and now a little bit of the turquoise. So I've got a little problem there. That's going to cause a blossom. So I'm taking a damp brush, sopping that up. Now I haven't used the blue yet, so I'm just going to use just a little bit. This is Winsor Blue green shade. And it's going on looking very similar to the turquoise. I'm going to come back with a little yellow. So I don't want the street to be very dark, since pavement is basically a gray color. But I'm getting some kind of crazy colors. So running the paper towel along the edge will help prevent backwashes. So that is what it looks like. I'll let the painting dry overnight, and the next step is to mask in the values that I want to keep. So that's going to be the sky, some values on the trees, some values on the lamps, some values on the people and the cars, and the street, as well as some details in the buildings. I also have written in my signature in pencil, and I'll use the fine liner to go over that, and that will keep that light value throughout the pours and the maskings I'm going to do. At the end, when I lift all the masking fluid off, my signature will read in light blue. I'll do the fine liner first, and then I'll go back in with a brush and do these large areas, and then I'll have to wait for it to dry. I got that bubble because I had held the fine liner for a while vertically, and that's why I got a bubble. I'm having a bit of a perception problem. For some reason, there seems to be some difference between my drawing and the reference. And so it's making me stop, making me consider. I've completed all the masking for the values that I want to preserve. And now I'm getting ready to wet the paper and pour on the colors. At first I thought I wanted to try to preserve the green color of the foliage, but I already have warm colors down, and so I think if they turn out to be fall colors, that will be okay. Because what I'm going for is to try to keep these orange, pink, and red colors that are starting to develop in these buildings that are higher up towards the sky. And then as we go down the paper, it doesn't really matter what color they are. They're going to get darker. These colors are going to be, this building will be fairly dark. This will be dark in here. I don't really care what color the people turn out to be. It would be nice if they had some kind of a skin tone, but I mean, even if they had blue faces, I'm not sure I care. So now it's time to wet the paper. So I may have to just smush that around with my finger because of those little crevices I was talking about. And I can see pigment's having a hard time getting into here. So that's why I've smeared it with my finger. And because I've got pigment on my gloves, I have managed to come up with a gray color, which might actually work. One of the things I get frustrated about when I tour places is that when you're on vacation, you only have the daytime to help you out. There's a little problem here. And so I love the light in the afternoon. I think the light is just more interesting. You get a lot more cast shadows. You see a lot more reflections of the light on different objects. But daytime is what you get when you're on vacation. And so you use what you got. But being an artist, we can choose what we want our art to look like. We can choose our colors. And that goes for any kind of painting, not just pouring. You can see how the shapes are starting to come out as I get more and more value. The way the people appear a bit silhouetted, which if the sun's lower in the sky, you would see that. They would be a bit silhouetted. The latest pour has dried and I've applied more masking fluid to protect the next level of values. As before, I'm going to wet the paper entirely. And this is not going to be the last pour. I'm going to do one more after this one. This will be medium dark values. The major difficulty of this composition is masking the details, handling the masking pen, however you do that, whether you use the fine line tool that I use or if you use, I can't remember the name of the pen that people will use to fill with masking fluid. Hopefully you're not feeling intimidated by this composition, and I agree that it's ambitious. However, if you can trace, you can take about any composition that you can imagine, trace it onto a piece of watercolor paper, and plan to do pouring, because it's the mask that controls it. The colors are out of control, but the mask controls it. I'm getting ready for the final pour where I put the darkest values in. And I run the risk of getting it too dark. What the painting needs is the figures in the foreground need to be darker because they should be backlit, since I'm seeing the sunlight is streaming this way. I've diluted the colors to the final concentration. I've masked everything that I want to keep. I would say that the most difficult part of pouring isn't the pouring, though there can be some challenges when it won't go into certain areas that are blocked by the masking fluid. It's getting the masking fluid onto the right places. Sometimes I get a little mixed up. And so I just take my time, look at my value study, or look at the original reference photo to help guide me. And that seems to work. Plus, if you mess up, you can always go back later with a brush. You probably are going to do that anyway. There'll be some things you'll want to adjust. After I finished this phase of the painting, I was really eager to take the masking fluid off, but I knew that if I didn't dry the painting absolutely bone dry, that I would run the risk of tearing the paper. So, being a sunny spring day, I said to myself, oh, I'm going to go lay it out in the sun. Well, not only was it sunny, it was breezy. I didn't think too much about this. A little wind, it'll dry faster, right? I checked on it 15 minutes later, and it was gone. There was nothing but clean paper. The watercolor block had a clean piece of paper facing up, and I panicked. So I looked around the yard, and sure enough, the wind had loosened the paper from the block and blown it across the yard and was almost in our vegetable garden. So I was able to retrieve it, and there was no bird poop on it, thank goodness. The painting is dry, and I'm going to remove the masking fluid. Some of the paint did lift off as I pulled off the masking fluid, so I plan to go back and adjust that with a brush. And now I'm going to unmask my signature. Here's the painting without the masking fluid. This is what I took off the painting. Look at that. With a few final touches with a brush, the painting's complete. If you still need to learn more about value so you can apply it to poured paintings, check out this video.